7-0 in the first quarter.
Very disappointing. I hate it for our fans. I hate it for my teammates.
Intercepted by Porter Augustin. This is an amazing story.
When it doesn't end the way you want it to, you're always going to feel it's your fault. I still have a year left on my contract. I hope the Steelers want me back if that's the way we go. And there'll be a lot of discussions, but now's not the time for that.
It's the time for that with us, though. Look who's here. Ryan Clark, RC, good to see you. Super Bowl champ with the Steelers. I will get to you in just a moment,
don't
sir.
Smile. Don't smile. There's nothing to smile about. You know, you and I both know there's nothing to smile about. There's nothing to smile about.
I want to start with you, and I want to talk about Big Ben. How should the Steelers feel about their quarterback after last night's performance?
Well, they shouldn't feel too damn good. They were 11-0, and they ended the regular season losing 4 or 5 games. And then yesterday, they lost their first playoff game, where he threw 4 interceptions, and they were down 28-0 in the first quarter. All totaled in 7 games, he's thrown 10 interceptions in the last 7 games of the season. And so I think you have to reflect on that. And then you have to look and scour the league and think about the people that are truly, truly successful. Patrick Mahomes is an exceptional quarterback, but he's also someone who's capable of using his legs to make things happen, moving the chains. You look at Lamar Jackson, that speaks for itself because of his running ability. You look at Aaron Rodgers, that speaks for itself. Drew Brees and Tom Brady would be the admirations because they're not scrambling on anybody. But you get that point. Then you have to remember how Taysom Hill looked when he was filling in for Drew Brees because of his ability to run the football. It's not so much that Ben Roethlisberger is some scrub or something. He's a 2-time Super Bowl champion. He's a future Hall of Famer. We respect him. We understand what he's brought to the game of football. And it's not like he's Peyton Manning from 2015 or so, where the skills had so clearly and flagrantly dissipated, where you had Rob Ninkovich coming on national television the other day acknowledging that as a defense in New England, we knew that Peyton Manning couldn't throw the ball 20 yards. And so we planned accordingly. That clearly is not the case with Big Ben Roethlisberger. But nevertheless, you do have to ask yourself at some point, when do you move in a different direction? Because he's not the person that Big Ben who could shrug off tacklers and extend plays the way that he used to, which, by the way, makes him a stationary target. Yet a stationary target that's not nearly as accurate and precise as that of a Drew Brees. And so when I look at it from that perspective, if you're the Pittsburgh Steelers and you could get your hands on a Mac Jones out of Alabama, for example, and he can fall into your lap as the future of this franchise, I certainly would strongly consider moving on for Big Ben Roethlisberger at that particular time. And if nothing else, don't look past this next season in terms of keeping him around. I do think that his days are close to being over, the Big Ben that we knew and loved.
Well, I think Roethlisberger left it all out on the field, and that's the thing. That's what he's got at this point. He's made to look worse because the offensive line can't protect him, can't block for the run, can't give the receivers time to get down the field for the most part. And there's no AB on the team anymore. If Roethlisberger was in Brady's position, I don't think he'd be doing as well as Brady, but he'd be doing, at this point, he'd do better if they protected him, if they could run the ball a little bit, if they had receivers everywhere you looked. I think Roethlisberger would look better than he looked. And like he gave it what he had. Nevertheless, this has been going on all season. He doesn't look good throwing the ball down the field. He had a remarkable season for a 38-year-old coming off catastrophic injury who completely changed his style of play. The question is, when you look at that guy, do you think you can win a Super Bowl with that? I don't think so.
Yeah, Big Ben's decline in play is really a symptom of the major problem in Pittsburgh. And when I look at these two teams, the Cleveland Browns now are kind of what the Pittsburgh Browns, Myles Garrett saying that same thing in his post-game interview. This team isn't scaring people anymore. They aren't more physical. They aren't dominant. They aren't the big brothers of this division. And I think that falls on Ben as well. If I gave you a hat, Max and Stephen A. Molly, if I gave you a hat and I put the 4 quarterbacks in the AFC North in it, and we all had to go play a game, each of us would be praying that the quarterback we pulled wasn't Ben Roethlisberger. And that's how far he's fallen. You'd want Lamar first. You'd want Baker Mayfield first. You'd even want Joe Burrow first. And I'm talking about for a year, not for the future. You'd want them for the year. And so when you look at Ben counting $41 million against the cap next year, what this team looks like with him, it's not just about what do you do with Ben Roethlisberger? It's about what do you do with this offense? You have an aging offensive line, you don't have a number one back, and you have wide receivers that are sometimes unreliable. And so when you look at what the end of this season was for the Pittsburgh Steelers, yeah, it was on Ben. He didn't necessarily play well, but you knew who he was at the beginning of the season. Yet you threw the ball plus 40 times a game, 60 in the last game of the season in the playoffs. You can't do that. He can't do that. So, yes, Big Ben's play has declined, but I agree with Max. If you had the right situation around him, I think he could be successful, but you don't. And in not having that, it's time to rebuild. And so it's time to find you a quarterback of the future. The problem to me is that Kevin Colbert, the GM of the Pittsburgh Steelers, hasn't found that quarterback already like we see many other teams doing.
He absolutely has not, and that's a big, big problem. Make no mistake about it. But the other thing that I'd like to point out is that the Steelers, the crime that they've committed more than anything else is the loss of their identity. To not be able to run the football for 3 consecutive years is inexcusable. They have ranked 29, 30, or 31, 29, and then 32 this year. That is just horrific, and that is not the Steelers' identity. If you can't run the football, you can't take any kind of pressure off of Ben Roethlisberger whatsoever, because all you're asking him to do is carry the load even more than he was accustomed to for the first decade plus of his career. And by doing so, you know he's prone to make mistakes, which is why he's never been mentioned in the same breath as the Tom Brady. It's not because he can't have those heroic moments. It's not because he can't put up big numbers. It's because you know that with Big Ben Roethlisberger, even though he's going to do more good than bad, a mistake is inevitable. It's what he does. It's just that customarily you had a defense and you had a running game to offset the impact of those mistakes. The Steelers don't have that now, and I don't think that is ever. I think this is the first time that I've ever looked at the Pittsburgh Steelers football team and I felt like the team was soft. Like there were other teams that were significantly more physical than them. And you combine that with Juju Smith-Schuster. He's young and we get it, and he's opened his mouth. But Ryan, you're a Super Bowl champion with the Steelers. That's just not something the Steelers ever did. They just went out there. They waited for you on a Thursday night or a Sunday or a Monday night. And they were like, okay, we'll see you. We heard you and we'll see you. It's not usually them talking. They're usually responding to somebody who did some talking. And oh, by the way, that was rare because people knew better than talking smack to the Pittsburgh Steelers. But now they're the ones doing the talking and they're the ones not backing it up.
Since you guys are talking Steelers and who could, like what does the future look, right? Like if Roethlisberger's declining, what do? They're a victim of their own success in a way. Roethlisberger's a top 10 pick. He was in a quarterback-rich class with Eli and Phillip Rivers. And when you're never below 500, and when you don't use any excuses, you just go out and compete and almost always make the playoffs, like Mike Tomlin does, you do not have good draft position to grab a quarterback. Now, by the way, just like the Patriots, they had to try to kind of hope Garoppolo could turn into something, right? Because they always have winning records. Those kind of teams, I know Brady was a late-round pick, and you can find guys later in the draft. We brought up Russell Wilson, Dak Prescott today and on Friday and everything, but usually the best quarterbacks are the very high draft pick. Pittsburgh don't have those guys. And by the way, I'm not